Star Wars and zombies. What better combination could you ever ask for? What's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. You're with Chris, and today I'm super excited to be sharing with you the third episode in my brand new segment, reading the Star Wars Expanded Universe. Now this time I decided to pick up Death Troopers by Joe Schreiber, published in 2009. I had an absolute blast with this one. It was a great little read, and the events take place between A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back. So let's start how I always like to, with what the book is about for those who haven't read it, and taken straight off the cover as per usual. When the Imperial prison barge, the Purge, temporary home to 500 of the galaxy's most ruthless killers, rebels, scoundrels and thieves, breaks down in a distant, uninhabited part of space, its only hope is with a Star Destroyer found drifting, derelict and seemingly abandoned. But when a boarding party from the Purge is sent to scavenge for parts, only half of them come back, bringing with them a horrific disease so lethal that within hours nearly all aboard the Purge die in ways too hideous to imagine, and death is only the beginning. The Purge's half-dozen or so survivors, 2 teenage brothers, a sadistic captain of the guards and the chief medical officer, the lone woman on board, will do whatever it takes to stay alive. But nothing can prepare them for what lies aboard the Star Destroyer amid its vast creaking emptiness that isn't really empty at all, for the dead are rising, soulless, unstoppable and unspeakably hungry. I have to say guys, the writing here is very, very solid. The pacing is way up there, especially with the short punchy chapters, which I'm a really big fan of. I think if you've got short punchy chapters that end on cliffhangers, you can't feel anything but compelled to read on. And the suspense was created really, really well amidst the claustrophobic environment of the prison barge and the scary emptiness of the Star Destroyer. Usually a Star Destroyer is equipped with a crew of about 10,000, and there's just no one here, and that even though it's a massive empty space, it's still unsettling and really puts you on edge. And both these settings create the perfect backdrop for this insane element of horror that just really unsettled me, and hadn't read anything like this before. And I think this is one of the only books in the Star Wars EU, don't quote me, but the only book that has a really strong horror element. Now let's talk about some characters. I think one of the most interesting characters was the main Imperial Guard, the sadistic Jareth Sartoris. Now he's very interesting because at the start of the book we see him as a really merciless guard and really bad to the bone. But over the course of the novel we see him change a little bit, and we see a more compassionate side of him, which was really surprising because, especially with an Imperial Guard like this, you wouldn't think he would have a capacity to change his tune. Okay, now the cameos. I have to talk about these cameos here. I'll only briefly touch upon it because I'm not going to spoil it for anyone who hasn't read this book, but I think about chapter 19 we had Zahara, the medical officer, on board, going down to the lower holds to see if there were any prisoners affected by this ravaging disease that plagues the barge. And I have to say, as soon as the description was made for one of the prisoners, I think I was on my own at the time, and I remember just going, yes, getting excited because these particular characters are Star Wars EU favourites, and it was great to read about them. But that's all I'm saying. I'm not going to spoil it for anyone, but I found that a really great moment and really fun to read about. Alright, let's talk about the grossness of the writing and all the scenes where all the inmates die in hideous ways. I think the graphic imagery that Joe Schreiber exhibits here is second to none. And it was very indicative of Stephen King back in his heyday, going for the gross out and the way things are described with bodily fluids and blood and guts and all sorts of stuff, he just put you right in that atmosphere, and I found myself getting a little bit squeamish at times because of the nature of the graphic imagery he portrayed there. I think a writer is very gifted to actually invoke those reactions in you, and I thought Joe Schreiber just absolutely nailed it and provided really good descriptions. But not only that, I think the urgency of trying to get out of the Star Destroyer was very, very well done as well, because there was a race against time, and the amount of zombified beings in this book was just beyond comprehension. Okay, now I found the whole nature of this deadly virus very, very intriguing and frightening at the same time, and sometimes vomit-inducing. How the Empire had plans to distribute this virus across the galaxy as they see fit is a very, very terrifying prospect to read about. But, you know, it was nail-biting all the way through, and I think the character development was second to none. So it was primarily a horror novel set in the EU universe, but it was also a really good example of how characters evolve over time, and there were emotional scenes as well involving the two teenage brothers, Trig and Kale, which was compelling to read about as well. So you know, some parts of this was heartbreaking. In the midst of all this horror, to feel those kind of emotions was you know, very different. So it altered the balance there a little bit. But look, I think Joe Schreiber is an author, after reading this, whose work I will seek out. I think he's written a few books in the Star Wars EU. Again, don't quote me on that, but I'll be interested to see what else he has written in the EU. But look, I love the book immensely, really flew through it. I can't recommend it enough. If you haven't read the book, I implore you to pick it up. Just don't eat first before reading it. Because it can evoke some squeamishness in the old stomach there. But yeah, there you go. Thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed that. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. If you've read the book already, drop me a line and let's compare notes. But if you haven't read it, I think you'll get a kick out of it. It's not very long. I think it's about 260 pages, so it's very low commitment. But it's unlike anything I've ever read, and it was just a real eye-opener. And if more books are going to be this awesome in the Star Wars EU, I'm so looking forward to continuing my journey there, and can't wait to share my thoughts with you with my future reads. So I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to be reading next, because I don't know myself, but I like the spontaneity of being a mood reader now for the channel, because at the end of each video I used to say, right, coming up next I'm reading this, this and this, and then more often than not I wouldn't follow through with it, which is why I scrapped TBRs, because they just don't work for me. And I think releasing a book review video, it creates a bit of spontaneity there, so it's a surprise, so you don't know what's coming next. As always, offer up any feedback below and always respond to that. But until the next video, guys, happy reading.